Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. My name is Ethan, and I'm 30 years old today. I sit here in an old wheelchair, the metal creaking slightly every time I shift my weight, in a small room at a disability support center in Ohio. It smells like disinfectant and distant sadness. Outside the window, it's raining a steady, rhythmic tapping on the glass, like fingers drumming a beat to the memories I've spent years trying to bury. But they never really go away. They live inside me, even now. And I suppose, for what it's worth, I'm ready to talk about them. I'm not a millionaire. I don't have tens of millions in some glimmering bank account. I don't live in a mansion with tall iron gates or drive cars that shine like polished jewels. I'm just a survivor. A man carrying scars, some you can see on my body, others you can't, buried far deeper, where nobody dares to look. But to explain any of it, to make any of it make sense, I have to go back. Back to the beginning. To the place where it all started. A rundown neighborhood in Ohio. A place they called River Bottom. The name alone already hinted at despair. The kind of name that sounds like someone had given up halfway through caring. It was a corner of Cleveland where the houses leaned like tired old men, wooden slats rotting, paint peeling. Everything felt gray even when the sun was out. The air smelled like a blend of engine oil and garbage, something you just got used to if you lived there long enough. I did. My home was a two-bedroom apartment with stained, yellowed walls and a roof that always leaked when it rained. I used to place a pot under the worst spot in the ceiling and listen to the slow plunk, plunk, plunk of the water as I tried to fall asleep. My father, Calvin, did odd jobs at an auto repair shop a few blocks away. He came home with hands blackened from oil and a breath so thick with beer you could smell it before he opened his mouth. My mother, Lena, worked as a waitress at a tired little diner. She wore a faded pink uniform and forced a smile for customers who barely tipped. They were tired people, my parents. Worn down by work, by bills, by life. We were poor. So poor dinner was often just peanut butter sandwiches. I learned early not to ask for things. No toys, no outings, no new clothes. Just don't ask. That was the unspoken rule. But I was still a kid. And kids dream. I found joy where I could. Running wild through the neighborhood. Jumping puddles, climbing stacks of old tires behind my dad's shop. I imagined I was an explorer, deep in the jungle. Dangerous missions. Secret worlds. I had a best friend, Tommy. Scrawny, all elbows and knees, with wild red hair and a permanent smudge of dirt on his cheek. Tommy loved science fiction. He was always borrowing books from the tiny library on the corner. Ethan, he'd say, wide-eyed and full of fire, one day, you and I are going to get out of this hellhole. You'll see. And I believed him. God, I really did. I believed that one day I'd be someone. Do something great. That belief carried me further than you'd think. But then, when I was 9 years old, everything changed. It was a chilly autumn morning. The kind where the windows fog and the floor feels too cold under bare feet. I was still rubbing sleep from my eyes when my mother called me into the kitchen. She was standing by the counter, holding a cup of coffee with both hands like it was keeping her upright. She wore her old, worn-out sweater, the one with the sleeves that stretched too long, but her eyes were different that day. Not tired, not warm, just tense, like she was hiding something. Ethan, she said quietly, not looking me in the eye, you're staying home from school today. I blinked. What? Her voice trembled a little. We're taking you for a health checkup. A special place. I wrinkled my nose. What kind of checkup? I'm not sick. Just then, my father appeared in the doorway. He leaned against the frame with that same look he always had, arms crossed over his chest. He let out a low grunt, then muttered, don't ask too many questions. Let's go. We piled into my dad's rickety old truck, the one I used to jokingly call the coughing machine, because of the way its engine sputtered and hacked like a smoker on his last breath. I didn't joke that morning. I just climbed in, quietly, wedging myself between my mother and the rust-flaked door. The truck groaned as it pulled out of the driveway, and the farther we drove, the quieter everything became. We left River Bottom behind, the sagging houses, the broken fences, the smell of motor oil and damp leaves. The city thinned into empty fields, endless and brown, with only the occasional tree flashing by like ghosts. No one said much during the drive. My father kept his eyes locked on the road. My mother clutched her purse tightly on her lap. I looked out the window, pretending to count fence posts just to keep my mind from wandering. After what felt like hours, we finally arrived. A single gray building stood alone off the highway, surrounded by cracked pavement and silence. It didn't look like a hospital. There were no signs, no flags, no emergency entrance with blinking lights. Just a squat, concrete structure with a heavy iron door and a few scattered cars. It looked like a warehouse. Or a bunker. Something made to keep secrets in. I didn't want to get out of the truck. My hand found my mother's, and I felt the coldness of her palm instantly. She was shaking. "Don't be scared, Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely holding together. But she was the one trembling, not me. Inside, everything felt wrong. The floors gleamed too much. The white walls felt like they were watching. The air had that clinical bite of antiseptic, but it couldn't hide the unease crawling under my skin. A man in a white lab coat appeared, his steel-rimmed glasses catching the light. He was tall, older, with a clipboard tucked under one arm and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Hello there," he said, his voice smooth and too cheerful. "You must be Ethan." I nodded, staring up at him. "I'm Dr. Holden." He reached out and patted my shoulder. "Healthy young boy. Just a few small tests, and you'll be home in no time." His hand was dry and light, but it made my stomach twist. I looked up at my parents, silently asking what this place was. My mother forced a smile. "We'll be right here," she said. "The next part is a blur like a dream you don't want to remember, but keeps finding its way back in pieces." They took me into a white room. Cold. Stark. Like all the warmth had been scrubbed out of it. A nurse told me to lie down on a metal table. I obeyed. A prick in my arm. Another in my neck. I tried to ask what they were doing, but the words slipped from my tongue. My eyelids grew heavy, the lights above smearing into a blur. Then darkness. When I woke up, I was in my own bed, back at the apartment. My head throbbed with a dull ache, and my limbs felt like I'd run a marathon in my sleep. Everything hurt. I tried to sit up, but even that felt like too much. My mother sat beside me, stroking my hair gently. "You're fine," she whispered. But her eyes didn't meet mine. "Well, what did they do to me?" I asked, my voice dry and small. She didn't answer right away, just kept stroking my hair, over and over. "It was just a checkup," she said finally. "Don't worry." I wanted to believe her. I wanted so badly to believe that everything was okay. But something inside me had shifted. I felt different. Not just tired wrong. Like a part of me had been taken away. Weeks passed. Then came the pain, sharp, stabbing jolts in my legs like someone driving hot needles into the muscles. I told my mom. I told my dad. They said it was just growing pains. But it got worse. I started falling at first once or twice, then more often. I couldn't keep up with the other kids. My legs didn't listen to me the way they used to. One afternoon, I tried to climb the pile of tires behind the auto shop, the same one where I'd spent so many hours pretending to be an adventurer. I reached for the top, like always, but my legs gave out. I fell. Hard. My knees slammed into the dirt, my palms scraped raw. I couldn't get up. Tommy was with me. He panicked and ran for help. My dad showed up minutes later, silent and stiff. He scooped me up, cradling me in his arms like a sack of something broken. His jaw was clenched. "Why weren't you more careful?" he muttered. That was all he said. Not "Are you okay?" Not "We'll figure this out." I didn't cry from the pain. I cried from something worse. Helplessness. Like the world had turned on me, and no one noticed. Over the next few months, everything spiraled. The pain turned to numbness. I couldn't walk without crutches. Then not at all. Eventually, a doctor at the local hospital gave it a name: paralysis of the lower body. A rare neurological disorder, he said. No one explained why. No tests. No follow-up. Just a label and a goodbye. My parents didn't fight it. They didn't ask questions. They just brought home an old wheelchair, scratched metal, torn seat, wheels that squeaked with every push. And as I struggled to adjust to this new life, I started to notice something strange. My family changed. First, it was the truck. One day, it was just gone, replaced by a shiny new SUV, dark blue with leather seats. I asked where it came from, but my mother just said, "Your father's doing better at work." Then, not long after, they sat me down in the kitchen. My mother took my hand in hers. "We're moving," she said. "What?" I asked. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. A fresh start. But her smile wasn't genuine. We left River Bottom behind like a bad memory, trading crumbling sidewalks and flickering street lamps for a pristine suburb lined with trees and rows of houses boasting manicured lawns and perfect white picket fences. It didn't feel real. It didn't feel like ours. The new house was huge, 2 stories with a fireplace in the living room, gleaming wooden floors, and a kitchen that looked like something out of a magazine, all granite countertops and chrome appliances. I remember sitting in my wheelchair in the middle of that shiny new space, feeling like a worn-out toy someone had forgotten to throw away. I didn't belong there. One evening, as my dad was locking up his new car, an expensive model I didn't recognize, I rolled up beside him on the driveway. "How can we afford this house?" I asked. He paused for a second, his hand still on the keys, then gave me a faint smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Business is better now," he said. "Don't ask too many questions." But I wasn't stupid. I noticed things. The thick envelopes they shoved into drawers when they thought I wasn't watching. The late-night phone calls whispered in the hallway. The sudden disappearances, sometimes both of them, would be gone for hours without explanation. My mother started dressing differently, nicer clothes, silk blouses, shoes that clicked when she walked down the hall. She wore makeup even when she wasn't going anywhere. Her earrings sparkled under the kitchen lights. My father's hands were no longer stained with grease. Instead, he wore a shiny new watch, and he walked like a man who had nothing to worry about. But they never looked at me the same way. There used to be warmth in their eyes when they looked at me, tired, sure, but still there. Now their glances felt hollow, like I was a debt they'd racked up and were trying to forget. They went through the motions, feeding me, clothing me, but the love, the laughter, the gentle touches, they were gone. I tried to adapt. I memorized every bump and curve of the house so I could navigate it smoothly in my wheelchair. I practiced turning corners in silence. I tried talking to the neighborhood kids, once tried wheeling up to them at the park, saying hi, but they just stared at me like I was something from a museum. One boy even asked, "Can you feel your legs?" Like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. I never went back after that. Tommy was gone. My only friend. He didn't move with us. He didn't even know where we went. And I never got to say goodbye. At school, it was worse. They called me names when they thought I couldn't hear. Wheels. Creeper. One kid even called me broken. I kept my head down, rolled from class to class, and ate lunch alone. I started spending all my free time in the school library. Books became my refuge. In those pages, I wasn't Ethan in a chair, I was a knight with armor, an astronaut hurtling through space, a hero saving the day. In those stories, I could run again. At home, it was like I didn't exist. My parents stopped asking how school was. They stopped checking in on my reading or helping with my assignments. Dinners turned quiet. I sat alone at one end of the long dining table, while they sat together at the other, murmuring about business plans, vacations, and something they always called the future. One night, I overheard my mother whisper to my father after dinner, "Just a few more years, Calvin. Then everything will be fine." I didn't know what everything meant, but something in her voice made my stomach twist, like a warning I couldn't quite understand. And I kept noticing things. Once, when I went looking for paper in my father's study to draw just something to pass the time, I found a thick stack of documents in his drawer. They were covered in complicated words I didn't fully understand. Clinical trial, consent form, compensation package. I didn't know what they meant, but they felt wrong, like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. I didn't bring it up. I didn't dare. Anytime I asked a question, even a small one, my father would get angry. "Don't meddle in adult business, Ethan," he snapped once, slamming his palm on the kitchen table so hard that a glass of water tipped over and shattered. I flinched at the sound. He didn't even look at me, he just walked away. Then, when I was 11, my mother got pregnant. At first, I was hopeful. I imagined having a little brother or sister to play with, someone to talk to laugh with. Maybe things would be different with a baby in the house. Maybe the family would come back together, and I wouldn't feel so alone anymore. When Ronald was born, everything changed. He was healthy, a perfect baby, bright blue eyes, chubby cheeks, always giggling. My parents doted on him like he was made of gold. They took pictures, laughed at every sound he made, kissed him constantly. And I became a shadow in my own home. They poured all their attention into Ronald. They bought Ronald expensive toys, robots that talked, train sets that lit up, entire castles made of plastic bricks. He had picture books stacked higher than he could reach, and stuffed animals that lined every shelf in his room like a crowd of adoring fans. They took him to the park, to the zoo, to birthday parties thrown by the neighbors' kids. And every time, they returned with bags of souvenirs and rolls of freshly developed film filled with his smiling face. Meanwhile, I sat in my room alone. My only companions were my creaky wheelchair and the worn-out books I had read so many times I knew them by heart. One afternoon, I mustered the courage to ask my mother, "Why don't you ever take me with you? I'd really like to go to the zoo too." She didn't even pause as she set Ronald's jacket on a hanger. Her eyes flicked toward me, cold and unblinking. "Ethan, you just complicate things." Those 6 words sliced through me like a blade. I nodded quietly, rolled myself back to my room, and didn't ask again. I started hearing other things, harsher things, whispers through thin walls and closed doors. Useless burden. A disaster from the past. At first, I tried to convince myself I'd misheard. But as time went on, they stopped whispering. They stopped pretending. My father would glance at me and sigh, like I was an unsolvable problem. My mother would avoid my eyes altogether. One night, long after the lights were off, I heard them in the living room. Their voices drifted under my door. "If it weren't for him, things would be so much easier," my father said. His voice was low, but filled with frustration. "We did what we had to, Calvin," my mother replied, sharp and flat. "No regrets." I lay there, eyes open, staring at the cracks in the ceiling while tears silently rolled down my cheeks. I didn't make a sound. I didn't move. I just let the words sit in my chest like stones. Why had I become this unwanted thing in my own home? I didn't know then that the worst was still ahead of me. That the secrets my parents kept the needles in that cold white room all those years ago would come back one day like a wave I couldn't stop. But back then, I was just a boy trying to survive the loneliness, never realizing I'd been sold long ago. By the time I turned 18, while other kids dreamed of college or road trips or wild parties, I had no dreams left to chase. That number meant nothing to me, just another tick on a lifeline I hadn't chosen. I sat in my room, watching from the window as the golden leaves of an Ohio autumn spiraled down. It was Thanksgiving. The air was sharp, almost metallic, and the sky hung low and gray. The house behind me buzzed with movement and laughter. But in my chest, all I felt was cold. A winter that had arrived too early, freezing over every last inch of hope I had left. By now, I was used to it. Used to the way Calvin and Lena, my parents, no longer pretended. Used to being the background noise of their perfect life. I was the mistake they didn't talk about. The one they locked in a room and walked away from. Ronald, now 7, was everything I wasn't. He had my father's eyes and my mother's smile. His legs ran without stumbling. His voice echoed with joy. My parents praised him constantly. Ronald's going to do great things, my father would say, grinning, placing a hand on his shoulder like some monarch bestowing a crown. And me? I was the past they buried under expensive carpets and granite countertops. But this Thanksgiving felt different. I knew it from the moment the morning light crept through the blinds. My mother was already in the kitchen, whirling around like a dancer on stage. She wore an elegant red dress, cinched at the waist, with her hair curled and lips painted in a deep, glossy shade. She looked like someone out of a movie, not the tired woman I used to know. The turkey was roasting. Pumpkin pie cooled on the windowsill. The air was thick with the scent of spices and sugar. My father moved briskly through the house, setting the table, polishing glasses, barking instructions like a man preparing for a royal banquet. He was on the phone talking to relatives, confirming arrivals, his voice charged with a strange energy. Ronald darted from room to room in a tiny black suit, a red bow tie wobbling at his neck, giggling as aunts and uncles came through the door. "Oh my goodness, look at you," one of them exclaimed, crouching down to hug him. "You're truly the pride of the family." I stayed in my room, trying to block out the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses drifting in from the rest of the house. I'd learned over the years how to retreat, how to shrink myself into silence, like a snail pulling into its shell whenever the world became too loud, too cold. But then there was a knock. A soft rap, too deliberate to ignore. "Ethan," my mother's voice called out, sweet and artificial like syrup masking something bitter underneath. "Come join us for the feast. It's a special day." I blinked. I couldn't remember the last time they'd asked me to join anything. Birthdays, holidays, even dinners had become rituals I observed alone. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I turned the wheels of my chair slowly, cautiously, and rolled out of my room. My heart beat faster with each creak of the floor beneath me. A part of me, small, foolish, hoped maybe this night would be different. Maybe they remembered I existed. Maybe I would be seen. The living room was radiant under the chandelier's golden light. The long dining table shimmered with elegance, white linen tablecloths, polished silverware, wine glasses sparkling like crystal, and dish after dish of aromatic food. It looked like something out of a magazine. And yet, it felt like it wasn't meant for me. Relatives and friends filled the chairs, laughing, their faces flushed with wine and warmth. People I barely knew, people who'd maybe seen me once when I was younger, offered me quick, uneasy smiles before turning away. The smiles didn't reach their eyes. They never did. Ronald sat nestled between my parents at the center of it all, wearing a little vest and clip-on tie like a prince holding court. My mother had one arm draped around his shoulders, and he leaned into her, grinning as if the whole world belonged to him. I quietly wheeled myself to the far corner of the table, where no place setting had been laid out for me. I said nothing. I didn't want to ruin the illusion. I just wanted to be part of something. My parents' expressions were strange. Not angry, not happy, nervous, uneasy. They kept looking at Ronald, then at each other. It was like they were waiting for something. Finally, my father stood, lifting his glass. His voice rang out above the chatter, calm and rehearsed. "Thank you all for being here today. Thanksgiving is a time to be grateful for what we have, and I'm proud to say that Lena and I have built a life worth dreaming of." Applause broke out around the table. Someone whistled. Another shouted, "Hear, hear." I looked down and fidgeted with the napkin folded across my lap. It had little golden leaves embroidered into the fabric. I stared at them, trying to drown out the creeping loneliness pushing up my throat. But then my father continued. His voice shifted, growing more serious. Today, we want to share an important decision. A decision for the future of this family. I looked up. My chest tightened. My mother gripped Ronald's hand and gave him a smile so bright it looked painted on. My father let his gaze sweep across the table, pausing at every face, every guest, every relative. Except mine. It was like I wasn't there. Then he said it. We've decided that all of the family's assets, this house, the cars, the stocks, everything we own will be left to Ronald. Our pride and joy. The room erupted. People clapped. Some even stood and applauded. That's wonderful, someone exclaimed. Such a wise choice, said another. A toast was made. Glasses clinked. And Ronald beamed. He hugged my mother, and she bent down, whispered something in his ear that made him giggle with delight. I just sat there, frozen. My fingers clenched the arms of my wheelchair. Everything, the home I had lived in, the future I hadn't even dared to dream about, belonged to Ronald now. Not a single mention of me. Not a thank you. Not even a glance. It wasn't about the money. It was never about that. It was about being acknowledged, being seen, being loved. I couldn't help myself. The words tumbled out, soft but sharp enough to slice through the noise. What about me? The room went quiet. Forks paused in midair. Heads turned. My mother's posture stiffened. Her hand froze on Ronald's shoulder. My father turned to face me. The warmth in his eyes was gone, replaced by something hard, cold. Then he laughed. But it wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was a blade disguised as laughter. What about you, Ethan? He said, each word dripping with scorn. What do you have to contribute? You've been a burden we've carried for 18 years. Too long. The words hit me like a hammer to the chest. The room spun around me. I could still hear my father's voice echoing in my ears like a curse. Whispers rippled down the table. I even caught a few quiet chuckles, soft, cruel little sounds like nails dragging across a wound. No one stood up for me. Not even my mother. She just looked down at her lap, pretending she hadn't heard me speak at all. Ashamed of me. Ashamed that I had dared to speak. Ronald turned and looked at me, his big, bright eyes blinking with innocent confusion. He didn't understand. He couldn't. Part of me wanted to scream at them, to slam my fists on the table and shout until someone finally saw me. Until someone realized I wasn't invisible. Until they remembered that I was their son, too. But I didn't scream. I couldn't. I just sat there. My hands were trembling, gripping the arms of my wheelchair like they were the only thing anchoring me to reality. My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I swallowed them down. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Not in front of these people. Not like this. The feast carried on. As if nothing had happened. As if I had never spoken. As if I didn't exist. Laughter resumed. Glasses clinked. Toasts were made to Ronald, to his bright future, to the brilliant decision my parents had made. Their voices faded into a blur as I slowly wheeled myself away from the table, unnoticed. Not a single voice called after me. Not one. I rolled down the hallway, into the quiet shadows of my room, and closed the door. The soft click of the latch felt final, like the slamming of a vault. I let the darkness wrap around me, thick and cold. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't move. I just sat there, listening to the muffled joy still floating through the walls. But my chest felt hollow. The pain I felt wasn't just from tonight, it was years in the making. 18 years of being invisible. Of being tolerated. Of being treated like a mistake no one wanted to admit to. I glanced around my room. The narrow bed. The old wooden bookshelf. My collection of adventure books lined up neatly. Stories that had kept me sane when no one else had. These things, these quiet objects were my whole world. And yet they belonged to this house. A house where I had no place. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, eyes open, watching the shadows crawl across the ceiling. The sounds of silverware clinking and drunken laughter floated through the vents, reminding me how far away I really was even under the same roof. I thought about River Bottom, about how poor we were, but how my parents still used to laugh with me back then. How my mother would sing while stirring soup. How my father once carried me on his back just to watch fireworks. Then I thought about the needles in the white room, about the smell of antiseptic, the way they told me it was going to help, how my legs stopped working, how everything changed after that. Their sudden wealth, the new house, the late-night whispers, the shiny things they wore. It all came flooding back like puzzle pieces falling into place. Something had always felt wrong. I just hadn't wanted to face it. But tonight, when my father looked me in the eyes and called me a burden, something inside me shattered. I couldn't stay. I couldn't breathe in this house anymore. Not without choking on the silence. On the cold. I sat up slowly, turned on the small desk lamp. Its dull light cast soft shadows across the floor. My hands were shaking as I reached for my backpack. I packed quietly only what was truly mine. A few clothes. My favorite books. Some photos I'd hidden away in a drawer. I crept into the kitchen like a stranger and snuck a few granola bars and a water bottle. My wheels creaked softly against the tile. I moved like a ghost through my own home. No plan, no map, no destination. Just a single, burning truth. If I stayed, I'd die. Not my body, but the rest of me. My soul. My hope. Everything that made me Ethan. At dawn, I opened the back door. The early fog clung to the ground. The ramp my father had built long ago waited silently like a path I wasn't meant to take, but had to. I paused. Looked back once. The house was glowing with light. My family was still asleep, dreaming in warm beds while I prepared to vanish. I thought of Ronald. Sweet, innocent Ronald. Maybe someday he'd ask where I went. Maybe someday he'd want to understand. Then I thought of my parents Calvin and Lena, once my entire world, now just silhouettes behind those curtains. I turned away, and I wheeled down the foggy street with nothing but pain in my chest and a soul held together by splinters. I rolled through the empty suburban lanes, past houses waking slowly. Kitchen lights flicked on. Dogs barked in the distance. My arms ached, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. I made it to downtown Cleveland by mid-morning, where the city sagged under gray skies. Under an overpass near the train station, clusters of homeless people huddled in blankets. Their faces looked weathered but alive. An older woman in a frayed coat watched me approach. Her eyes narrowed as she stepped forward. "You lost, kid?" I shook my head slowly. "No," I said, my voice barely audible. "I just don't have a home anymore." The woman studied me for a moment. Her eyes weren't judgmental, just tired and understanding. She didn't ask anything else, just gave a soft nod and gestured for me to follow. She led me to a disability support center a few blocks away, tucked behind a brick building with peeling paint. It wasn't much, just a cramped space filled with cots and the faint smell of soup, but to me, it felt like the first breath after drowning. They gave me a temporary bed and a hot meal. I ate slowly, barely tasting it, just feeling the warmth spread through my chest. That night, I lay on the hard mattress, the thin blanket pulled to my chin, listening to the snores and wheezes of strangers all around me. Every sound seemed to echo through the room. I stared at the ceiling, my backpack beside me, the only thing I truly owned in the world now. I had nothing but a few books, some clothes, and a heart that felt carved up and hollowed out. But somewhere in that emptiness, something began to stir. Not hope, no, I wasn't that naive. It was something else. Rage. A slow, simmering burn that spread from my chest to my fingertips. Rage at the way my parents had treated me, at how they discarded me. Rage at their cruelty, their indifference, their silence. Rage at not knowing why. Why had I lost my legs? Why had they gotten rich? Why had I become the burden? I wanted answers. I needed them. In the days that followed, I tried to settle into the rhythm of the support center. It wasn't home, but it was a roof and a place to breathe. The people here were like me, wounded, tired, pushed aside by the world. Social workers with dark circles under their eyes shuffled through paperwork, doing what they could. No one asked too many questions. It was an unspoken rule. I was given a small corner in the communal sleeping area. A curtain hung on a wire gave me some privacy, though the walls were paper thin. During the day, I'd wheel myself to the nearby park, finding a quiet bench where I could read and watch people live the kind of lives I'd only imagined. Some days I tried to imagine what it would be like to be them. Most days I failed. But the rest of the time I thought about Calvin and Lena. And Ronald. And those words from Thanksgiving. "You've been a burden we've carried for 18 years. That sentence lodged itself in me like a thorn. I replayed it every night, feeling it twist deeper into my chest. Each day that passed, the silence from my parents felt heavier, like they had erased me from their story. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. I was returning from the park, the late sun casting gold on the cracked sidewalk, when Maria, the staff worker with tired eyes and a curly bun, called to me. "Ethan," she said, holding up something white. "There's a letter for you." I stopped. "A letter?" She nodded and handed it to me. It was plain. No stamps. No return address. Just a white envelope, sealed, with a name written across it in blue ink. To Ethan. I frowned. No one knew I was here. I hadn't told anyone where I'd gone. Not my parents, not anyone. This place wasn't somewhere people just found unless they knew where to look. My heart kicked in my chest. I thanked Maria quietly and wheeled back to my corner. I shut the curtain behind me and turned on the dim desk lamp, the buzz of fluorescent light humming overhead. The envelope was thin. It crinkled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, like the writer had been rushed or afraid. I unfolded it and read the words. "You're not sick. You're a victim. Your parents sold you as a test subject. My child was a victim too. They're brokers for an underground pharmaceutical organization. Investigate, Ethan." No signature. No date. Just sharp, Brutal lines that felt more like wounds than words. I stared at the letter. Sold you as a test subject. Underground pharmaceutical organization. The phrases wrapped around my brain like barbed wire. I wanted to laugh, to toss the paper in the trash and chalk it up to a cruel joke. But something deep in me wouldn't let go. A small voice whispered, rising from the part of me that never stopped asking why. You've always known something was wrong, haven't you? I sat there in the pale light, the paper trembling in my hands. I gripped it so hard it began to crumple, my fingers curling tighter and tighter. And then the memories came. Not gentle ones. Memories sharp as glass. The sterile white room when I was 9. The needles. Dr. Holden with his cold, clinical smile. I could still feel the sting, the sterile sting of metal on skin. The way my legs had first grown weak, then stopped responding altogether. And after that, the SUV. The move to the big suburban house. The way my parents started answering late-night phone calls in hushed voices, doors closing between us. And how their eyes changed when they looked at me not like a son, but like something owed. Something they regretted ever owing. Those memories had been buried for years, shoved down so deep I almost believed they'd never happened. But now they came roaring back sharp, twisted, and undeniable. Still, I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. They were my parents. Calvin and Lena. However cold, however distant, they were still the ones who put food on the table, who bandaged my cuts when I was small, who read bedtime stories once, long ago, before the stories stopped. They'd raised me, hadn't they? Even if it was like raising a shadow. How could they do something so horrific? I stuffed the letter into my jacket pocket, heart pounding, breath shallow. I told myself it was nothing. Some crackpot. Maybe someone jealous of my parents' money. Maybe a mix-up. Maybe a lie. But the words wouldn't leave me. They followed me through dinner, through the quiet shuffle of the support center's halls, into my cot under the dim light. That night, I lay there, still and silent, eyes wide open, listening to the soft symphony of snores and coughs around me. In the dark, I thought about Ronald, my little brother growing up in the warmth I never had. His smile. The way he looked at our parents, so full of trust. You've been a burden for 18 years. That sentence played again in my mind like a broken record. And then I thought of my legs. Taken from me. With no explanation. If the letter was true, if any part of it was true, I had to know. Not because I wanted revenge. Not then. But because I needed the truth. I had to know why. Why me? Why my body? Why this life? The next morning, I decided to start. I didn't have much, but I had that letter. And my memories. That was enough for now. Hey Maria, I asked as I rolled into the front room. About that letter. She looked up from her clipboard. Yeah. Did you see who dropped it off? She frowned and tapped the pen against her lip. Some guy? Didn't say a word. Just walked in, handed it over, and left. What did he look like? Baseball cap pulled low. I couldn't see much of his face. She shrugged. Sorry, Ethan. He didn't want to be recognized. That gave me a chill. Someone had found me, and they didn't want to be found. Still, it wasn't fear that stirred in me, it was curiosity. And something more dangerous. Determination. Back in my corner, I grabbed my old notebook. The one I'd used for stories once when I thought books could build worlds better than mine. I opened it and began writing. Everything I could remember. The checkup when I was 9. The white room. Dr. Holden. The metal table. The needles. I closed my eyes, trying to push the memories into focus. But they were hazy, like trying to grasp smoke. I wrote anyway. Then came the images that burned brighter, my parents' new house. The endless string of phone calls behind closed doors. That one night I snuck into my father's study, just curious, and found a folder with words I didn't understand back then. Clinical trial. Compensation. They hadn't meant anything to me at the time. But now they screamed. I couldn't ignore them anymore. I decided I had to go back. Back to where it all began. River bottom. I didn't have money, but the support center offered free bus passes for people like me, people with disabilities. I took one. The ride was long and quiet. My reflection in the window looked older than I remembered. Gaunt. Eyes too hollow for someone my age. But my heart beat like a drum. When the bus pulled into river bottom, it felt like a slap to the face. Everything was the same. Dilapidated houses. Faint smell of motor oil, trash, and something else I couldn't name. Faces that looked like they'd stopped hoping a long time ago. But to me, this place was more than decay. It was memory. I wheeled down familiar streets. The auto shop where my father used to work, shirt stained with grease, yelling over the sound of engines. The empty lot with the leaning fence, once a mountain in my imagination. The pile of tires where Tommy and I used to play. My first and only friend from the old neighborhood. Tommy. I wondered where he was now. Did he still remember me? Did he ever think about the boy in the wheelchair who disappeared? I rolled up to the old apartment building. Still the same chipped brick, same uneven steps. Someone else lived there now. Blue curtains in the windows. a child's bicycle with training wheels leaning against the door. I stared at it, and for a moment, I felt like I was looking at another me, a version untouched, the 9-year-old Ethan. Before everything fell apart, I didn't know what I expected. Maybe some kind of sign, an answer, something that would make the trip worth it. But there was nothing, just the same cracked pavement, the chipped paint on familiar doors, and the hum of silence that blanketed the neighborhood like dust. Still, I couldn't leave without asking. Most of the old neighbors were gone, moved, evicted, vanished like old ghosts. But I found Mrs. Rosa. She still lived across the street, just like she had back then. Her porch was faded now. Like her, a little smaller than I remembered, slanted and cluttered with old flower pots and knitting yarn. She was sitting in a lawn chair, her fingers working slow, delicate movements with bright yarn. Her eyes were cloudy, like she was peering through fog, but when I rolled up and introduced myself, she leaned forward. "Ethan?" she asked, blinking. "The boy who used to climb those tire piles with scraped knees and muddy shoes." I smiled faintly. "Yeah, that's me." Her face lit up with something sad and warm. "My goodness, you've grown." I swallowed and nodded. I wanted to ask you something. About my parents. About when we lived here." Her hand slowed. The needles paused. She didn't answer right away. When she finally did, her voice was distant. "They changed, Ethan. After that time they took you somewhere. Your mother." She came back crying. "I saw her. Right on that porch. I felt the air go still. Crying." Mrs. Rosa nodded. But she wouldn't say why. "Then, just like that, they had money. A new car. Left within the month." I tried to breathe slowly, to keep my voice from cracking. Did anyone ever ask about it?" She shook her head. "Everyone thought it was strange, but no one dared. You know how people are here minding their own." Her words sent a jolt through me. A spark of fear. And certainty. I hesitated, then reached into my jacket and pulled out the letter. I held it in my lap. "Someone left this for me. Said my parents sold me. That I was used in some kind of pharmaceutical testing. That they're part of something underground." She stopped knitting altogether. For a long second, she just stared at me. Then, her voice dropped to a near whisper. "Ethan, a few kids from this neighborhood disappeared around that time. Just vanished. Nobody knew where they went. There were rumors, though, about a clinic. Out near the highway." "What kind of clinic?" Her lips pressed tight. "Not a hospital. People said it wasn't right. Said shady things went on there. But no one ever had proof. No one wanted to get involved." I felt my hands trembling against the wheels of my chair. "Do you remember where my parents took me that day?" She looked straight at me then, with something like sorrow. "No. But I remember your mother's face when she came back. Something broke in her that day. I try not to let it break me too." "Thank you," I said quietly. "Be careful, Ethan," she said, voice barely audible now. "People who do things like that, they don't like being found out." I wheeled away, heart thudding. I didn't look back. The letter wasn't a prank. Or paranoia. It was real. Whatever had happened to me wasn't just abandonment. It was betrayal. And the fire inside me wasn't just burning anymore, it was raging. When I returned to the center, I pulled the letter out again. "You're a victim." My child was a victim too. Who had written it? How did they know me? Why now? There were no answers. But the need to know had become a weight I couldn't carry anymore. That night, lying in bed, I opened my notebook and wrote one new line. "Find Dr. Holden. Find the clinic on the highway." I didn't know where it would take me. But I knew one thing. I wasn't the boy from that Thanksgiving anymore. The letter had unearthed something I thought I'd lost for good. I would find the truth, no matter what it cost me. My investigation began with small, clumsy steps. Like feeling my way through a cave blindfolded. No resources, no guidance, no money, just this hunger. And a notebook. I figured the best place to start was my medical records. If what I remembered was real, if there was any paper trail, it might be there. I remembered that after that mysterious health checkup when I was 9, my parents had taken me to the local hospital in River Bottom. That was when my legs had started going weak. It was worth a shot. I picked up the phone in the center's common area. My fingers were cold, slippery with sweat. A woman answered. I need to access my medical records," I said. "From 2009. "What's the name?" she asked. "Ethan. Ethan Ward." She paused, typing something. "You'll need to come in with valid ID." That was it. I ended the call, heart hammering. I didn't have much. Just an old ID my parents had made me get. A flimsy thing, a few years out of date. I shoved it in my backpack, took a free bus pass from the front desk, and left. The River Bottom Hospital hadn't changed. Same dirty brick, same cracked parking lot, same yellowed walls and flickering lights. Inside, the hallway smelled of antiseptic and old dust. The paint was peeling from the corners. I wheeled slowly to the reception desk. A tired-looking woman was typing. She looked up when I approached. "I need to see my medical records," I said. "From 2009. My name is Ethan Ward." She studied me for a second, then gestured. ID. I handed it over. She typed and typed. Finally, she got up and walked to a back room. A few minutes later, she returned and handed me a thin manila folder. This is all we have on you, Ethan, she said, placing it in front of me. But some things aren't clear. I opened the folder right there, hands trembling, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The first page was too simple. A typed line stated I was diagnosed with an unspecified neurological disorder at age 9, admitted after sudden loss of mobility in my lower limbs. But what stopped me cold was the note beneath it. One sentence. Handwritten. Faded. Transferred from private medical facility. Dr. Holden. No blood tests. No x-rays. No MRI reports. No explanation for why my legs had stopped working. Just that one name. Dr. Holden. His name leapt off the page like a specter, dragging me back to the white room, the metal table, the needles, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes. My breath hitched. My palms were slick with sweat. I looked up at the receptionist, trying to keep my voice steady. Do you know anything about a Dr. Holden? Or this private facility I was transferred from? She squinted at the file, then shook her head. Back then, small clinics popped up and disappeared all the time. Most weren't even registered properly. No one kept track of them all. I felt like the ground beneath me was giving way. Is there anywhere else I can ask? Someone who would have kept track. She thought for a second, then said, maybe the state health department. If they issued any permits or inspections, they might have something. I nodded, swallowing hard. Thank you. Clutching the thin folder to my chest, I wheeled myself out of the hospital. The sun outside was bright, too bright, like the world had the nerve to keep going while mine cracked open. The records didn't give me the truth. They just gave me more questions. Why hadn't there been any tests? Why was Dr. Holden the only name? And the biggest one, why had my parents never taken me anywhere else? I couldn't stop thinking about what Mrs. Rosa had said, the clinic on the highway. That had to be the next step. I went back to River Bottom. The streets felt tighter now, more hollow. I passed the old auto shop again, the broken fence, the bus stop with its faded ads. I started asking people. Anyone who might have been around when I was a kid. Most just shook their heads or gave me vague answers. Clinic? I think I heard something. Oh yeah, trucks used to show up late at night. Kids vanished, but people always vanish around here. It was like chasing smoke. Until I found Mr. Joe. He was sitting outside a little diner on Main, hunched over a cup of coffee, the steam curling up around his weathered face. I remembered him. He used to bring over old car magazines when he visited my dad. Mr. Joe? I asked cautiously. He squinted, eyes cloudy, then leaned forward. Ethan? Calvin's boy. I nodded. He motioned to the chair beside him. Well, I'll be damned. Sit down. Or, he gestured awkwardly at my wheelchair. You know what I mean. I gave a small smile, then said quietly, do you remember a clinic? From back then? Out on the highway. His face changed. A shadow fell over it. That clinic, he rasped, his voice lower now. Yeah, I remember it. I leaned in, my pulse thudding in my ears. It was a few miles out on Highway 71. Gray building. No sign. People said it was for drug testing, but no one ever dared go near it. My heart thumped. My parents took me there, didn't they? He nodded slowly. They did. After that, they changed. Your dad, Calvin, suddenly had money. Bought that shiny red car. Then poof, moved away. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Did he ever say how? What he did to get rich? Mr. Joe gave a wheezy chuckle. Said it was good business. But come on, nobody gets rich that fast. Not in River Bottom. His laugh didn't reach his eyes. Did you ever hear of a Dr. Holden? I asked. He shook his head. Never met him. But I heard things. That clinic didn't just test on adults. They used kids too. Poor ones. Orphans. Kids nobody would miss. His words landed like ice in my bloodstream. Kids no one would notice. That was me, wasn't it? Poor. Unimportant. A shadow in my own house. A chill ran through me. My fingers gripped the arms of the wheelchair until they ached. I need to find that place, I said. Mr. Joe nodded. It's still there. Last I saw it, anyway. But it's been shut down for years. I thanked him and left, his voice echoing in my head. Back at the support center, I went straight to Maria. She saw the look on my face and didn't ask questions. When I told her where I needed to go, she made a few calls, and by the next morning, she had arranged a free ride through a local charity. The trip was quiet. Long. We drove past empty fields, weather-worn fences, broken signs. The sky was gray, low, pressing against the car windows like it wanted in. Finally, the driver slowed. This it? He asked, peering ahead. I looked up. My stomach clenched. There it was. A gray building, hunched beside the road like it had been forgotten by time. No sign. Just concrete walls, broken windows, a heavy iron door. It was the place. The clinic. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Weeds grew thick around the entrance. The front door was secured with a rusted padlock, its iron surface eaten away by time and weather. I wheeled closer, the crunch of gravel beneath me the only sound in that still air. Not a soul in sight. I leaned forward and peered through a crack in the boarded-up window, pressing my forehead lightly against the cold glass. Inside was darkness. Dust floated in shafts of light breaking through holes in the ceiling. The remains of old furniture, broken chairs, a filing cabinet tipped on its side, a desk missing drawers lay scattered like the forgotten bones of a place that once held secrets. If this had been a clinic, it wasn't anymore. It was a grave. A part of me had hoped needed to find something. A file, a photograph, a paper trail. Anything to say, yes, this happened to you. But there was nothing. It was like the place had erased itself. Like it had never existed. I sat there for a long while under the gray sky, my breath fogging up the window, feeling like I'd touched a locked door in more ways than one. This clinic was my only lead, and it had turned to dust in my hands. My thoughts returned to the letter. Its cruel, cutting words. You're a victim. Your parents sold you as a test subject. If the clinic was gone, if it had been swept off the map and buried under weeds and silence, then there was only one place left where answers might still live, my parents' house. I remembered the folder in my father's study. Clinical trial. Compensation. The words had meant little to me as a child. Now, they echoed with suspicion. But going back there, walking into that house again was not easy. Just thinking about it made my chest tighten. That house with its white walls and warm fireplace and neatly arranged cutlery had never been a home. It was a stage set. A place where I was tolerated at best, ignored at worst. A burden. Still, if the truth was locked in my father's drawers, I was going to find it. No matter what. I packed my notebook and my old ID into my backpack, zipped it up with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling, and made my way to the nearest bus stop. The support center didn't ask where I was going, and I didn't offer it. Some things were too heavy to say out loud. The ride to the suburb felt like traveling to another world. The bus pulled up in front of the neat little neighborhood, all fresh paint and trimmed lawns. I stared at the white picket fence in front of my parents' house, the same one I used to trace my fingers along when I was still small enough to believe in bedtime stories. Now, it just looked like a gate between me and the past. I wheeled up to the front door, my hand hesitating for a full 10 seconds before knocking. When the door opened, I froze. My mother stood there, and her expression-tight eyes, clenched mouth told me everything I needed to know. "Ethan," she said, her voice clipped with surprise and annoyance. "What are you doing here?" I barely had time to speak before my father appeared behind her, arms crossed. "What are you back for?" he snapped. "Didn't we make it clear? That night we announced the inheritance so you'd understand you have no place here." His eyes narrowed like I was a stray animal at the door. "You left, and we were glad. Because you finally got out. Why are you back?" His words hit me like a slap. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream. To throw every question I'd kept buried in my gut for years. Why did you abandon me? Why did you treat me like a stain you couldn't scrub out? Why did you sell me? But I swallowed it all down. "I just came to pick up some old stuff," I said instead. "I'll stay a few days, then leave." My mother looked at my father. A silent exchange passed between them, the kind that always made me feel like a ghost in their presence. Finally, she sighed. "Fine, but don't cause trouble." That was it. No "how have you been?" No "do you need anything?" No hug. No welcome. Just conditions. They didn't ask how I'd survived, where I was staying, what I'd been eating. Their coldness wasn't new, but it still cut. They let me in. The wide hallways echoed beneath my wheels. Every turn familiar, but foreign. This place had never belonged to me. It was a home only in name. A place I drifted through, invisible between their new furniture and expensive rugs. Ronald was at school. His toys weren't scattered on the floor like they used to be. The house was quiet, filled only with the hushed clatter of my mother in the kitchen and the low hum of my father's TV in the den. They gave me my old room. Nothing had changed. Same single bed. Same bookshelf. The dust had been wiped, but it was as if time had frozen in here, as if they'd been waiting for me to stay gone forever. But I hadn't come for nostalgia. I hadn't come for them. I came for the truth. That first night, I waited. Sat in the dark with my notebook open on my lap. The words I'd written earlier underlined and etched into my brain. Find Dr. Holden. Find out what they did to me. Eventually, the house went still. The TV clicked off. Footsteps upstairs softened into the creak of settling floors. Then silence. I wheeled into the hallway, breath shallow, the carpet muffling my motion. My father's study was at the end, just past the stairs. As a kid, I'd always found that door locked. Always shut tight, like it hid something too important for me to touch. But now maybe because they thought I was gone for good. I slipped inside the study, quiet as breath. The house was still the only sound, a distant clock ticking in the hall. I shut the door gently behind me. then turned on the desk lamp. The soft amber glow lit the room in pools of warmth, a stark contrast to the cold feeling rising in my chest. I started searching. Drawer after drawer, I found nothing but the usual. Utility bills, contracts, envelopes from banks, letters about property taxes. Neat piles, carefully labeled. My father was always meticulous. But nothing stood out. I checked the bookshelf under the desk. Just legal texts and financial manuals, all dry and official. I even rifled through the trash can, hoping for a slip, a discarded draft. Nothing. The second night, I nearly gave up. Maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there had never been a folder, just suspicions and paranoia. I sat alone in my room that night, notebook open on my lap, and stared at the words I'd written days before. Find Dr. Holden. Find the truth. I couldn't give up. On the third night, my parents went out to a dinner party. Ronald had gone to a friend's. The house was empty. I waited 10 minutes after they left, then wheeled quietly down the hallway and slipped into the study again. This time, I opened the bottom drawer of the desk, the one I remembered from childhood. The one my father always said was off limits to kids. It was locked, but something made me check beneath the rug. A lump caught beneath my fingers, a small, tarnished key taped to the floorboard. My breath caught. With trembling hands, I slid the key into the drawer's lock. A soft click. Inside was a thick folder bound with a brittle rubber band. On the front, Miratech contract, 2009. I stared at it for a moment, my hands frozen, heart racing so hard it drowned out everything else. Then I opened it. Receipts. Dozens of them. Bank transfer confirmations from Miratech Pharmaceuticals to my parents' account. Tens of thousands of dollars. Some labeled brokerage services, others more blunt, clinical trial subject E. Subject E. I didn't need anyone to tell me who that was. There were more. A list of names, 17 in total, with notes scribbled beside each one. Neurological damage. Paraplegic. Deceased. My stomach turned. At the very back of the folder, a note in my father's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. Ethan, success. Continue cooperation. I sat there, frozen in the glow of the lamp, tears streaming down my cheeks. They hadn't just given me up. They had sold me. Turned me into a product. The first trial. The first case. The first payout. I wiped my face, copied what I needed into my notebook, then carefully stuffed the folder into my backpack. The next morning, I left the house without a goodbye. I didn't need one. They'd taken my legs. Now I was taking back the truth. Back at the support center, I spread the documents out on my small desk. Receipts. Contracts. Names. Notes. Cold, damning proof that my parents Calvin and Lena had sold not just me, but other children, to Miratech Pharmaceuticals. Kids with no defense. Kids like me. 17 names. Each one now etched into my memory. Some with notes. Ventilator dependent, neurological regression, deceased. I felt my chest cave in, like something inside was collapsing under the weight. I couldn't let this stay buried. But to fight Miratech and my parents, I needed more than documents. I needed people. Other victims. I started with the list. Every name, every detail I could find. I searched online. I sent messages, emails, even old-school letters by hand. Most never answered, but a few did. The first was Angela, the mother of Marcus. She told me he had become paralyzed after a routine health checkup in 2009. Her voice broke over the phone. She smiled so warmly. Angela said, talking about my mother. She made me trust her. Lena said it was a research program, something that would help all kids. But Marcus never walked again. I told her about my own story, what I'd found, shared the documents. Angela cried softly, then said, whatever you're doing, I want in. That was the beginning. One by one, I found them. Emily, now living on a ventilator. David, whose little brother died after his checkup. Each story, each voice was another piece of the puzzle. Each wound a match to mine. We formed a group. Anonymous. Quiet. The survivors. We met in an abandoned church, the stained glass broken, light pooling on cold stone floors. But inside, we were alive. Angry. Determined. We shared everything. The pain. The betrayal. The rage. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. Eventually, I contacted a lawyer. Lisa Collins. A human rights attorney I'd read about online. I emailed her. She replied in 2 days and invited me to her office. Her walls were lined with books and case files, her desk buried in papers. She greeted me with a firm handshake, her expression calm. I told her everything. She listened in silence, occasionally nodding, taking notes. I gave her the folder, the original Miratech documents. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. This is a big case, Ethan, she said. Her eyes locked with mine, serious, unwavering. But it's dangerous. She paused. Are you ready? I nodded. I thought of the names on that list, the children who couldn't walk, who couldn't breathe, who never came home. This wasn't just about me anymore. Lisa helped us file a class action lawsuit in federal court that March. We named Miratech Pharmaceuticals as the primary defendant and my parents as co-conspirators. The media exploded. They called me the man who sued his own family. Some supported me. Others painted me as a bitter son, a traitor trying to bring shame on his own blood. But I didn't care. I had evidence. I had survivors, and I had truth. The legal battle began, and I knew it would be brutal. The trial started on a cold, rainy June morning, just 3 months after we'd filed. The federal courthouse in Cleveland loomed like a monolith, gray and severe under the stormy sky. I wheeled myself inside, my hands trembling against the rubber rims, my heart pounding in my ears. Inside the courtroom, I could feel the weight of every eye: spectators, reporters, the survivors behind me. They had come despite their injuries, their grief, their fear. Emily, connected to a portable ventilator. David, clutching a photo of his brother. Angela, her lips tight with resolve. We were here, together. Lisa Collins, our lawyer, stood tall beside me, her briefcase in one hand, the other gently resting on my shoulder. Across from us, Miratech's legal team took their seats, sleek, cold, armored in designer suits and smug expressions. And then I saw them. My parents, Calvin and Lena. They sat stiffly behind the defense table. My mother's eyes found mine for the briefest second, then darted away. My father didn't even look at me. I never imagined it would come to this. To sit across from the two people who once tucked me in at night, who had smiled while selling me like a crate of medicine. Lisa stood, opened her file, and began. Your Honor, members of the jury, she said, her voice clear and unwavering. This case is about exploitation, about betrayal, and about justice long delayed. She laid it out piece by piece: the documents I'd found in my father's drawer, the Miratech contracts, the bank transfer receipts, every cold note that identified me as Subject E. One by one, she called the survivors forward to testify. Angela was first. She told the jury how my mother had lured her with promises of a free program to monitor child development. She smiled so warmly. Angela said, voice catching. I trusted her. And after that checkup, Marcus never walked again. Emily spoke next, frail, shaking, her words delivered through the soft hiss of her ventilator. They never asked for consent, she said. They injected something into me. I was 10, and now I live like this. David took the stand, clutching the photo of his brother. He never came home, he said. Each story was a wound laid bare, each voice a hammer blow. When it was my turn to testify, I wheeled slowly to the front. The courtroom seemed to shrink, the walls drawing closer as I faced the jury and my parents. I took a deep breath. I was 9 years old. I began. I remember the white room, the cold, the needles, Dr. Holden. I remember waking up and not being able to move my legs. I paused, my throat tightening. And I remember my parents suddenly buying a new car, moving to a better house, calling me a burden, telling me it was better this way. I turned toward them. They didn't just sell me. They used me to get rich. And they used others too. Marcus, Emily, David's brother, children with no voice. The courtroom fell silent. I looked at my mother. Her head was bowed, her shoulders shaking. I saw a tear fall to her lap. But my father? He stared at me, unmoved, eyes sharp and cold, like I was the one who betrayed him. Then it was his turn to speak. Calvin stood, his voice trembling with something that sounded like fury wrapped in self-righteousness. Ethan is an ungrateful son, he said. This is all jealousy. He couldn't stand that Ronald had a better future. We only did what we had to do, what was best for the family. His words hit harder than I expected, not because they hurt, but because I realized he actually believed it. Miratech's lawyers pounced on our testimonies, trying to discredit us. They called us opportunists, said we were mentally unstable, that we were looking for attention or payout. They tried to twist everything, minimize the damage, deny responsibility. But Lisa didn't flinch. She held up emails, internal messages from Miratech, leaked by an anonymous whistleblower. Emails that showed the company knew the drugs caused neurological damage, that they'd marked children like me as low risk because our families were poor. And still, they continued. 3 weeks. Every day felt like a war. But we stood strong. Then, finally, after closing arguments were made, the judge turned to the jury and gave his instructions. We waited, and then the jury delivered its verdict. I remember the air that day, clear and cool, the kind that whispers of change. Outside, the wind stirred the trees gently, but inside that courtroom, the air was thick. Like a rubber band stretched to its very limit, the tension hummed between every heartbeat. The judge, a man in his 60s with a stern expression and eyes sharp enough to cut glass, rose slowly. Everyone in the room stood with him, the scraping of chairs echoing like thunder. I gripped the sides of my wheelchair tightly. He looked over the rim of his glasses, voice steady. In the matter of the United States versus Calvin and Lena, he began, this court finds the defendants guilty. I didn't breathe. Guilty of federal human trafficking. Guilty of child abuse. Guilty of conspiracy in illegal medical trials. There was no noise in the room. Just that voice, delivering justice like a hammer falling. They are hereby sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. Their assets are to be seized and distributed among the named victims. I swallowed hard. My throat felt like sandpaper. And to Ethan, first documented victim, with permanent neurological damage, we award a sum of $1.2 million in compensation from the liquidated estate of Calvin and Lena. I stared at the judge, but the numbers didn't register. None of it did. Miratech didn't escape either. They were fined tens of millions. Several executives were let out in handcuffs, silent, pale, their expensive suits no shield now. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel relief. I felt nothing. My eyes landed on my parents as officers snapped handcuffs around their wrists. My mother looked back at me. Ethan, she whispered, tears streaking her face. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. I just looked at her. Let her see the silence she'd earned. Then I wheeled myself out, slowly, through that long marble hallway, the crowd parting around me like fog. The storm had passed, but inside me, something still churned. And now, 10 years have gone by. I'm still Ethan. Still in my creaky wheelchair. Still living in Cleveland. Still visiting the Disability Support Center every Tuesday and Thursday. Outside the window today, the rain is falling soft and steady, just like that morning after the verdict. But I'm not here to hide. I'm not here to mourn what was taken. I'm here to speak. To tell the truth. My truth. A story of loss, betrayal, but also of struggle and hope. I face a small circle now. A support group. Some new faces. Some old. A young girl with wide, frightened eyes and a prosthetic leg. An older man with trembling hands and a quiet, pained smile. They listen. I was 9, I began. They called it a checkup. They told me it would help. That I'd feel better. Then I woke up in a white room, unable to move. They leaned forward. I remember Thanksgiving night. I remember my father calling me a burden. I remember the anonymous letter, the one that finally told me what they'd done. Their eyes don't leave mine. I tell them about the folder, about the trial, about Angela and Emily, about finding the courage to face not just a corporation, but my own blood. When I finish, the girl wipes her eyes and whispers, if you could do it, I can too. I nod. And I smile. Not because I'm a hero, but because in her voice, I hear mine from 10 years ago. Broken. Scared. But still reaching. I used the $1.2 million not for comfort, not for escape, but to build something Survivor's Voice, an organization that helps victims of illegal trials. We offer counseling, legal aid, food, and most of all, a listening ear. We tell them they matter, that their stories matter, that their pain can become power. And now, before this circle before you, reading these words, I leave you with this. You are not a burden, no matter what they told you, no matter how many times life knocks you down. Even if the people who should love you the most walk away, you still carry something powerful. You carry the strength to rise. In your own way, in your own time. I lost my legs, but I found my voice. And if I can do that, so can you. Live. Speak out. Let the world know you deserve to be heard. Wishing you peace. And all things good. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.